All right. Well, good afternoon. And depending on where you are, it could be good morning, everyone. Wanted to first thank you, everyone, for joining our presentation. Today's presentation is titled From Selection to Success, a Nonprofit's Journey to Cloud ERP with Sage Intacct. And we have a very special guest joining us today. Her name is Chris Neely. So we're going to start with some introduction. I'd like to first introduce Chris and then I'm going to introduce myself. And so Chris Neely is the VP of Finance and Administration with United Way of Piedmont. Chris, can you maybe share a little bit about the organization's mission and something about yourself as well? That would be great.
Sure. I'm with the United Way of the Piedmont, which is in the upstate of South Carolina, and we serve three counties, Spartanburg, Cherokee, and Union County. We want to provide everyone with an opportunity to thrive, and we look at it primarily in three different ways, from economic mobility, education, and health. And we have a number of different programs that we facilitate to accomplish that. We have community resource coordinators that are embedded in the communities, from higher education with four different colleges to elementary schools where we're in two or three. I can't think which one it is right now. And then also within the community itself, focusing cradle to career in some aspects, but then also providing that budgeting and homeless prevention, which is so needed as well. And we just kind of integrate all together, whether we're funding partner sites and functioning as a joint funder, or we're convening and working on community topics with homelessness and behavioral health. And there are all sorts of things in between.
That's great. And just curious, how long have you been with the organization?
I am relatively new. I've been here over 2 years now, but the organization will be hitting 90 years next year.
Wow, that's great. And just general size of the how many employees with the
So
organization?
we have about 25 permanent employees, and we also had about 25 serving in the year of service with AmeriCorps Direct Service and AmeriCorps Vistas. So we're still looking at those grants as well.
Great. And I'm going to introduce myself really quickly. I'm Buu-Linh Tran. I'm Senior VP of Financial Solutions with JMT Consulting. While I'm fairly new with JMT, I've actually been serving and supporting nonprofits for over 30 years and leveraging financial solutions to help nonprofits with their back office accounting operations. And I'm located in the Washington, D.C. area. So I'm going to move on to the next slide. So just a quick housekeeping. If you have any questions, please submit your questions in the question box on your control panel, and we will answer them either at the end of the webinar. If we see them, we'll answer them along the way. Today's recording and slides will be emailed to you following the webinar. Our presentation here is CPE accredited, so your participation today may earn you one CPE credit. To receive a CPE credit, actively respond to polling questions. That's 3 out of the 4. Complete the survey that will pop up at the end of the webinar and stay on the duration of the webinar. If you have any technical issues, please indicate in the chat or email to the email that's provided there. And we just wanted to do a little bit of introduction of who is JMT. For those that are new to us, JMT was founded in 1991. to help nonprofits achieve their mission. We work exclusively with nonprofit organizations. We are headquartered in Nashville, Tennessee, as you can see in the map there. We service over 2,000 nonprofits across the US and a few in Canada, supporting the nonprofits back office accounting operations with financial systems and accounting services. So in terms of what we do specifically, as mentioned, we service over 2,000. We work exclusively with nonprofits. We support a number of systems, MIP, MARTIS. We do implementations as well as provide advisory services as well. So our learning objectives, key consideration during the ERP selection process, lessons learned during implementation, and how cloud-based ERP is supporting operational goals and strategic decision making. So since it's a CPE, this is our first polling question. So if folks can take just a few seconds to respond to these this polling question. So the question is, what is your current ERP solution? So while folks are answering that, we're going to move on to our first topic. So our first topic is the evaluation and selection. So Chris, what initially prompted your team to start the evaluating the new ERP solution? And maybe also share what was the ERP solutions that you were using, at that time?
So we were kind of funny in the fact that we didn't start out looking for a new ERP. We were currently using MIP and we were already using JMT. So, we had that partnership. What we were trying to do is just enhance MIP because we had a primitive version. It wasn't up to date. We didn't have the ability to do some import. So we wanted to see what that was going to look like. And we talked with JMT and we were talking with MIP directly. And during that process, we found some things that we didn't like about MIP. And JMT said, well, have you heard of and have you thought of going to Sage Intacct? And when we first did some of the demos and had some of those conversations, what Intacct offered was so far above what was available currently or even in the future with MIP. So we started doing more of the talks and the demos and asking questions and researching and just loved the possibilities that Sage Intacct had to offer.
And that's very, we do come across that situation a lot, meaning as folks are exploring, they have some needs and they're exploring in terms of what their current system can do. They quickly find, depending on the system, MIP is has been around for a very long time. It's a legacy solution. I think the one you're on, was it on premise?
So it was hosted, but
Okay.
it was that combination between Ace hosting and JMT where we had to go into kind of a VPN to
Oh, I
access.
see.
So it was not cloud-based, it was not pretty, it was not functional, but it did the job that we needed to at that time. And then I have done more ERP implementations with different software, so it was not anything that scared me going into a new one. So for us tackling that, I was ready for the challenge and have loved the outcome.
That would be great. Yeah, I mean, we do come across that. And as you're exploring, as other nonprofits explore their current system, they, quickly find that they may have outgrown their system, right? It's
Yes.
not meeting their needs. And, it depends on the situation as to, do you look at third party or do you look at changing to another system. And I think, a big part of it has to do with how can the system handle managing the needs, like, different dimensions, things like that. So that's great. I'm going to move on to the next question here. And that is, what were the biggest pain point with the previous systems?
It was clunky. It was clunky whether you were doing exports. It didn't have as much flexibility from a reporting standpoint, but the biggest issue was we didn't have the ability to import. So whether you were importing journal entries or importing invoices or, those weren't a possibility. So we didn't have the ability to increase our efficiency in our processes because the system just had its own constraints.
Yeah, that's a huge constraint, though.
Yeah.
Not being able to import, yeah, that's a lot of manual process. Um,
Yeah,
you know,
especially when you're looking at a payroll journal, which is
oh yeah,
hundreds of lines each time. So this just has added so much more flexibility for us.
that's great. And then the next item I have here is, how did you go about building your evaluation criteria? And you might, even if you're looking at your system and it not being meet your needs, did you have in mind sort of what were some of the things you were looking for, as part of as you were looking at other systems?
Yeah, so I mean, the biggest thing, and it was low hanging fruit, is
Yeah.
looking at imports. That I knew was going to give us flexibility and efficiency off the bat. Wanting to, have the ability to issue ACHs within there and create a NACHA file because previously we were doing all of that within the bank system and then going back into the ERP and entering the data, and it was double entry and a lot of work and just an opportunity for errors. So, creating NACHA files, imports, and functionality as far as reporting. And one of the things that we loved is the ability to have the non-finance users and create dashboards. So that's going to give, our team that much more access and transparency than they've ever had before.
That's great. Do you find yourself more connected in some ways with, other members of the team because, like, of the dashboards, or, the reporting aspects of that, you know?
So we haven't rolled it out completely yet, but
Okay.
it is something that the team is aware of. They are very excited when we're sharing screens and they can see what's coming. And it's just a matter of tailoring to their needs. But I've started writing all sorts of P&L reports that are for specific departments or specific P codes or specific restriction codes. So then we can really get the access for different programs or different grants based on what the needs are. And then that's been really useful from a budget standpoint, as well as, just seeing where variances are. And it's been as useful in creating this year's budget as it is tracking all the expenses throughout the year.
Right.
So,
What are I'm just curious as to, you mentioned budgeting. What are you currently using to sort of manage your budget today?
well, right now, I mean, the budget is created within Excel.
Okay.
Um, However, we have pulled out prior year data by month by, the full GL distribution. We load that into Sage, but then we also have pulled out the actuals so then we can compare prior year to budget when we are setting up the next year's budget.
Mm.
And then it's been great being able to drill down when we're looking at a particular GL code to see what activity has happened when there's a large variance in between, and we're looking at seeing, is it realistic in determining what the next year's needs are?
Great. I'm going to move on to our next section here. Um, oh, it looks like there's one more questions. Who was involved in the selection process and how did you ensure buy-in from key stakeholders?
Sure. So our CEO and I were involved in the process. She attended the demos. She was in on the majority, and then I got into more of the details when it crossed over into more of the implementation and project management. But it was the commitment between the two of us, making sure we were good. The board chair was aware of decisions. We brought the finance committee in so they knew where we were going and updated them throughout the process. But then when it came time to actually starting to build out and work on the training, it was my team as well. So, the nice thing as we got further into the implementation, just working with Lucy and building out how the system was going to work, we quickly realized that there were going to be more efficiencies in the system than we had anticipated, and it led to staff reductions. So we
Wow.
definitely had budget savings that came along with, selecting the software.
That is terrific. And you and I kind of talked about this right before we came on to
Yeah,
this presentation, talking about how something like that, especially during this time when there's lots of nonprofits are facing funding uncertainties, and having a system that can help reduce your cost, some of that cost is huge.
yeah. So it has been very friendly to use.
Yeah.
But then those were the extra surprises that were pleasant as well, because there were those cost savings. And, we found it, you know, we found it in a number of different ways the more we use it. But even with Hurricane Helene, when that hit, we were going through and working with clients. We had almost 4,000 clients apply for assistance within the first 2 weeks after the hurricane. And we met those needs in a number of different ways. But when it came to processing payments for utilities or mortgage or rent, for that, we were doing uploads directly into Sage Intacct. And had we keyed those, I mean, when we dealt with tornadoes in 2020, and when we dealt with ERAP funds in 2020 and 2021 after COVID, we did in 2 weeks what it took us to do in 9 months previously.
Oh my gosh.
So, I mean, the uploads were amazing. And we've done those from journal entries, we've done those from vendors, we've done those from AP invoices. We've integrated those imports as just normal business practices on reoccurring expenses. Um, it has been just so nice to have that flexibility, and then look at different ways to use it. So,
And it's a pretty system, isn't it?
yeah, yeah.
Uh,
I mean, it is so nice. I look at how long it took me before to do like the payroll journals and what it
yeah,
takes now,
yeah.
and it's just nothing for the imports, where
And just,
everything was a manual key before.
yeah. I was just curious, with the evaluation team, did anyone had anyone previously used Sage? Was this your first time or
This was our first time. One of from an evaluation standpoint, this was
sure.
our first time. And then one of the team members that came on had used Sage previously. So he was involved when we started the training because we had already gone through the configuration. So when Dougie started on the training, He was involved in that. Um, but I had my full team involved in it, and my full team at that point, there were three of us. So we went from 5 people on the team to 3 by bringing Sage in.
Oh my gosh, that's great.
Yeah,
Yeah, one of the things that we do find as we work with nonprofits that are evaluating sort of what their next solution is, we're finding anybody who has used Sage Intacct, speaks highly of that, but if you haven't, you kind of have to trust, you have to go through that due diligence and trust, what you see and, you know, you hope that it's going to deliver what you expect, but when you have that experience, it really does make a
yeah.
difference. All right, let's see. Thank you. Let's see if there's any other questions in this section. So one, why did you ultimately choose Sage Intacct well, I don't know if this would apply because you guys kind of knew that Sage was the solution for nonprofit and we're a big fan of Sage being since we only work with nonprofit and it is the solution that dominates that market. Or that sector. So, all right, so let's move on to the next item here. Um, so is your current ERP solution meeting your needs? So I know what the answer is for you 2 years ago, and that's why you transitioned to a new ERP. So folks can just quickly or just respond to this. In the meantime, we are going to move to the next section here. Let's see. All right, implementation experience. Can you walk us through your implementation journey? What
Yeah.
the timeline looks like and how you approached it?
So I think that we started the conversations about Sage at like the end of 23. And then in maybe January of 24, we kicked off with the implementation team, some light conversations, kind of timelines. Our fiscal year runs from 4/1 to 3/31, and we decided on a 7/1 go live date. So when we started with Lucy from the implementation side, it was fantastic because there was this massive spreadsheet with more tabs than you can imagine that covered absolutely everything you ever needed to look at. And then there was, working together and setting out that timeline in order to meet the go live date. And it was just really easy. Having prior ERP implementation definitely helped with that process, but the team was very easy to talk to, and it was just a very straightforward approach. So, highly
Oh,
recommend it.
good,
But it gave
great.
us a chance to look at everything and if we wanted to change or what we wanted to continue with.
That's great. And so you went live, you said 7/1, right? Was it?
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
your year end is
The year end is 3/31.
3/31.
Yeah,
Okay.
so we did several data dumps as far
Okay.
as, the detailed GL data that we brought out of the system and when it went over and when it got loaded, um, just so we could meet everything.
Hmm.
But it was very, very easy. And the team is great from a technical standpoint. If, you weren't sure how to pull the data out of your system, more than likely they're going to have the experience to tell you you need to write this report in this way in order to get everything that needs to be uploaded into Sage Intacct. And just very straightforward.
Yeah, so I will say that, given that we only work with nonprofits, we have migrated systems, various systems that are popular with nonprofits to Sage Intacct, so we certainly have a lot of experience with MIP. We also have experience with Great Plains, many, also QuickBooks is another very popular systems with nonprofits. So there's quite a number of systems out there that we have experience with. So. And speaking of your go live date, one of the things I just quickly want to mention is one of the questions I get asked a lot is, when should we go live with a new system? I get that question from nonprofit. When should we go live, right? And and I will say that the best time to go live is when, um, everyone is busy, right? This is not your full-time job. So I would go live when, if possible, when it's not as crazy, like when you want to implement the system when it's not as crazy for you. And it does not have to align with your fiscal year. Like in your case, your fiscal year ends March 31st and you went live the next quarter, basically end of your first quarter, right? So that was
Yeah.
perfect for you.
Yeah, and that was one of the things that, the team was very supportive in saying, no, you don't have to go with a fiscal year. You can
Yeah,
go anytime. We can bring over all the data that you need.
yeah,
Um, so I mean, that was just, it made it so much easier knowing that there wasn't the stress of trying to meet a particular timeline and seeing what
yeah,
made sense.
yeah. That's good. Um, and by the way, sometimes I find going live at when your fiscal year ends, sometimes it brings even more work because you've got a year end to deal with. And then you've got a new system. So sometimes doing it off, not aligned with your fiscal year, has its advantages as well. So our next question here is what were some unexpected challenge, if any, during implementation, and how did you overcome them?
I'd say the challenges that we had were not directed with the project itself, but it was a result of other projects that we had going on. And because it's such a lean team, just having the time and flexibility to focus on the implementation when multi-year audits were going on and, just the day job. Um, but again, because we had enough time and realistically, I think we probably spent more like 3 months in the actual implementation. Um, it was not related to the software. It was just related to the nature of the job overall.
Yes, because this is not the only thing you do. You have a lot of things going on at the same time. So totally understand that.
But it's nice knowing, project management and what the deadlines are and what needs to
Yeah,
happen when in order to get to that ultimate goal. And the team was fantastic with that.
that's great. All right, so see, moving on to the next questions here. So, how did you prepare your internal team for the transition, especially when it came to training and change management?
So there were some kind of generic training classes that were available overall and sent that to non-finance as well as the finance team. And then for the more tailored training, the full finance team attended all of the sessions with Dougie and Adam. And, we worked out you know, general plans of what they had, wanted to cover and the timeline with it, and then we could work out our specific topics as well. And that was just fantastic working through that. The senior team was well aware of what we were doing and how it was going along and very supportive of change. And then we've kept, our board of directors involved in the process too. And it's been nice to see what those efficiencies have been able to bring and look forward to being able to implement more to share with the team overall too.
That's great. The training, was it hands-on training? What kind of like training, you know?
So the initial ones that kind of a larger group attended were just some of the training modules within the system. So just the generic, and then the ones with Dougie and Adam were more specific. It was hands-on. Let's see how this works, show you how you enter, an AP bill, process a check, enter journals,
Sure.
create reports, and, each of those topics. Um, and then, it gave us, as we started it, we could put in our own practice. This is how we currently do it. What if we did something better? What is a best practice? How could you do this?
Right.
And so it just gave us the freedom to think and see what we could do differently.
That's great. And you mentioned about doing more, and I know that you are, looking at maybe the next thing would be to roll out some of that dashboards. Just as
Yes,
an FYI, I do have some clients that leverage the dashboard and to present financials to their board. I've also seen them use for like audits as well.
most
So
definitely, because and I've done some of the JMT webinars showing that as well. So I love the additional, post-implementation education that you guys offer, and just can't wait to take more of those webinars so we can better utilize the system too. But
oh, that
definitely looking at using dashboards for our board chair as well as for the auditors.
Yeah, that is great. I'm
Yes.
so glad you look into that because, as I've always said to folks, the thing with Sage Intacct, and you know this, is that you actually pay for the subscription annually, right? It's not like you pay one time and that's it. It's not like you
Yep.
pay one time and you own it. This is a subscription, which means that you want to take advantage of the new features, and they release it on a quarterly basis. And so, just as an FYI, I know you know this already, Chris, but for the folks here who may not be aware, we actually do a webinar to go through the new features of every quarter. And let me say this, we actually, I hate to toot our horn, but we actually do a great job. Our implementation support team does a great job showing these new features because we not only talk about that, but we actually show how those features work. And it's great that you're looking at it and really
Mhm.
taking advantage of the system, especially if you're paying for it every year. So, all right. Oh, we have one more. Say, if you could go back, what would you do differently during the implementation phase, if any?
I would have done it sooner because what we have gotten out of the system has just truly enhanced our operations.
Good answer. Good answer. All right, let's move on to our next impact and outcome. So, what are some of the biggest improvements you've seen since adopting Sage Intacct?
Really, the imports and how we've utilized them throughout the system, that has been a huge efficiency for us in accuracy and timeliness,
Yeah.
and has ultimately allowed for some reassignments. And then also being able to create that notcha file and just process ACHs directly out of the system. Um, Ultimately, we're looking at being able to transition from processing more checks to processing more ACHs overall. Um, and, just the access to information and how easy it is to create reports.
Wow, that's great. I'd imagine it's a report creation easier in Sage. I gotta think that it
Yes.
would be.
It really is. And it's so easy to just export it instead of having to export it and copy it
Yeah.
and paste it and move it and reformat it. It's already there.
Yeah, that's great. And I think that you mentioned that before you were doing some double data entry on the accounts
Definitely.
payable side, right?
Definitely, yes.
Yeah, that's great. All right. There was a question I wanted to ask you. I just it escaped my mind. If it comes back to me, I'll bring it up. How has the new ERP changed how your finance team work day to day?
It is, it's just made us more efficient, with the elimination of other positions. We've been able to reassign responsibilities, and still work in, you know, a normal time frame for them. So
It's good.
it just
I
makes it so much easier.
I just realized I just remember my question now, which I'm going
Yeah.
to ask. Um, just out of curiosity, when you did the implementation, was there much change to your chart of accounts structure or the dimension? Because I know that I believe MIP, like with many legacy system, they have like a sub account, you know. So I was just curious how that shift, you know.
For us, it really came over, almost identical. What we did was the GL account. We had 4 digits within MIP, and we changed that to 5 digits within Sage Intacct, and we just added that ending 0. And
Okay.
that just gave us that much more flexibility.
Oh,
The funds accounts came over identical, departments came over identical. The P codes, which is more of our project codes, came over identical. And then our restriction codes came over, but it came over different. But because we only had about 10 or 15, it's not like it made a huge difference what those were going to be. So those are the only things that got mapped differently. Um, Otherwise, what we had for our chart of accounts really worked well, and we didn't need to do anything, so it made that mapping that much easier.
great. What were when you said restriction account, what kind of restriction
So
are
the
they?
restriction codes are, so if, say, grant funding was assigned to a particular event where it could only be restricted for a particular use, those restriction codes are used to track the expenses and the revenues associated with those.
Oh, okay, okay. So it's
So
like either.
yeah, it's just another level.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
And I forget what it's actually referred to in Sage, which field it is, but for us, we know that it's still a restriction.
Okay. And I think that's the nice thing about Sage is that you can what they call repurpose or rename these
Yes.
dimensions. So you might have used like a class dimension that you kind of repurpose over to like the restriction dimension. So
Yeah, I'm going in there now because now I'm going to be curious what that field is called, and we've probably mapped it so it's yeah, I mean we've got it flagged as restriction, so I'm not sure what the original name was.
that's okay. That's okay.
But yeah,
But from your perspective, when you're looking at it, it would say restrictions or it would say
yes.
grant.
Yep.
Now, your grant, are you both a grantee and a grantor or
Yes. So we do a 3-year cycle for a community investment process.
Mhm.
And we are actually in the 3rd year of that cycle. And we are currently going through the process to evaluate the grant request from community
Okay.
and community partners. And we generally fund about $1.5 million each year in community projects throughout the 3 counties that fit into our mission. And we're looking at that. And so the funds are issued out as distributions.
Okay. And I'm not sure if you are already using this or aware of this, but I have worked with clients that are grantors, just similar to you
Hmm.
all. And one of the things that I've worked with clients on is building a checklist. So, you're issuing grants, there are things that needs to be done in
Yeah,
order for, a grant to be issued, right? And so you can go through a checklist to ensure that certain due diligence are in place. So a checklist may not necessarily just be like a month end or a year end checklist, but you could have a
right.
checklist specifically for managing your grant process, and it can, it could be helpful, right? And then you
Yeah,
also, the other thing it will do with that checklist, for each of the grants you're issuing, if it becomes feasible, and we have to look at it with you, but it will also document, who did what, and any attachments, and so it kind of keep track of the process. It keeps track of who does what, and then also making sure that every step of the way is done properly. So it's
no,
pretty,
that would be really interesting to take a look at because I've
yeah,
seen the checklist for more month end and
yeah,
how they're created, but looking at that and seeing if we can integrate our CIP with the checklist, that could be really good.
yeah. Because at the end of the day, it's just a checklist,
Yep.
And if you weren't doing it in Sage using a checklist, you're managing it in Excel or somewhere, right?
Right.
Making sure that, because I have a client years ago that also had their checklist, and a nonprofit I was working, they also have their checklist, and their checklist literally, it's like they call it the green binder that they had, or green folder, and they was on top of that was their checklist, and that they would go through it to just make sure that they've done all the due diligence before a grant is issued. So you can just basically, the checklist basically automates that process.
Okay. That'd be great.
And the other another point to make about the grants is that if you are a grantee, you one of the things I always mention is you can use the grant to capture the grant even before it's awarded. So you can track it because there's a status that you can set up. So you can even track it at the stage of a pre-award and not necessarily when it's awarded. And of course, these grants, you could do it you could set up the grant as both a grantee and a grantor. And, you can separate because some organizations are both a grantee and a grantor. So you could separate, these grants so you can manage them accordingly.
Cool.
All right. So let's take a look at next item here. Can you share specific examples where a new system helped you make faster and better strategic decisions? I think you talked about the ACH and
Yeah.
the import of the data. I think that was one of your main, one of the main focus. I do know that Sage has workflow as well. I wasn't sure if you were using any of the workflow functionality of the system.
As far as the approvals,
Yeah, like
yeah.
AP or stuff.
Yeah, so we definitely have the workflow approvals in place from AP, from the GL. So whether you're entering, an invoice, and routing it all the way through to getting the checks paid, there's, the audit trail and the approval all the way through. It's been really nice, to take a look at that and make sure before it's posted in the system that it's actually hitting the right GL accounts and you have the right dates in there. So that's been really nice. And then we've done the same thing as far as journal entries where that's entered, reviewed, and approved as well.
Cool.
But it's been good while it's outside of the system, using the system and pulling the data out of it during the budget process has been very useful.
Okay, great, great. Were you using an AP automation even in MIP at that time?
So in MIP, it would you still had to kind of work through it and review and approve it. Um, there were other people that were involved in it. So yes, it was there as far as a workflow with approval, but it's nice seeing it in play within Intact too.
I would think it's easier, right?
Much easier, because you can view it all at once, you can look
Yeah,
at it, you can decide, what level of detail do I want to look at? Am I comfortable and can I approve on a big level? Or do I need to go through and look at, each of the details?
yeah, great. Um, let's see. I think we have one. I think this might be the last one. Has it changed how you collaborate across departments or report to leadership and the board?
It has been very useful having custom reports written. So when something comes up, I can turn around and address it quickly. But then it's also nice to have the excitement building, know that there are those customizations and the dashboards and those non-finance user access that's in the works.
Great, great. Thank you. All right. So we are coming to our next polling questions. How long have you been on your current accounting system? So folks can take just a minute or so just to response. In the meantime, I think we're going to move forward to the next section here. Um, so this is our last question, actually. Final takeaway. So, what advice would you give to other nonprofit leaders who are just beginning to explore ERP solutions?
Don't be afraid of change. You
Good.
know, JMT offers a fantastic implementation project management team. They can walk you through everything. It's a very simple, straightforward process. And if you are looking at enhanced functionality, um, this is a fantastic project. I can't say enough about how easy it is to use it. And then it's great not only from an educational standpoint within the implementation, but just the tools and the support that JMT offers afterwards. Um, and depending on the level of system that you have currently, with what Sage Intacct has to offer, you may surprise yourself with being able to work in more efficiencies for additional cost savings too.
Yeah, thank you for that. Really appreciate it, Chris. A couple of comments. As I mentioned, I know we've been talking about Sage Intacct. It is definitely the dominant, solutions for nonprofits. And I've always said that nonprofits in general, we're very conservative. We're very conservative, in terms of once you have a solutions, you'll run it for I don't know, 20, 30 years. I don't know how long, United Way of Piedmont have had MIP. You guys probably had it for a very long time.
Oh yeah. Yeah, some of the data goes back to, I think, 2007. Um, I think that's about right with what's in MIP. Um, and then the other thing with us is we are still using a separate CRM. So we're using Stratus Live as a CRM. We don't have the integration yet. We want to take a look at that in the future. Um, so, we're still looking at that. But if you have the ability to not have a CRM and truly utilize just an ERP by itself, you're going to have even more reporting capabilities and just one integrated system.
Yeah, that would be great. And this is a system that allows you to grow with it. So you don't have to do everything day one, right? You can start with, sort of the fundamental, of what you need, and then add more to it as, as in terms of phase. It could be a phase approach implementation,
Right.
similar to what you're doing, Chris,
Yep.
All right, so well, let me see. I think we have. All right, so obviously we would love your feedback. We are very active, and Chris has mentioned that she checks out our webinar, our future webinars. So we are definitely very active, and we're always looking for topics from folks in the community. So what topics would you like us to cover on future presentations? We would love to hear from you and get feedback. And, because all the stuff that we do is really for the community and, whatever you guys can provide us, we would greatly appreciate that. And this is our last polling questions. Would you like to be contacted for more information after this presentation? So I'm going to move on to the next slide. So as I mentioned, we are very active, in terms of our presentation. We just highlighted a few of the upcoming presentations. So tomorrow, we have one that is talking about compliance and best practice in time and expense management. We'll be presenting that with a solution called data basics, and that's tomorrow. It's the same time. All presentations are at the same time, which is 2 to 3 p.m. Eastern. And then we have another one next week, which is unlocking the power of Excel for Sage Intacct reporting and more. And the reason we say more is because we are partnered with Velexo. It's a reporting tool, but I think what's really unique with Velexo is not only is it reporting Excel, it's pulling data from Sage into Excel, but it can also push data back into Sage Intacct. So from Excel, you can push data right into Sage Intacct. It's a bi-directional integration, this tool is very powerful, and it's next on the 28th. And then I know we just talked about the quarterly release. So Sage has already released the R2 functionality. And so we are going to go through and look at talk about the what's new with Sage Intacct R2 release, and that's on June 5th. Even if you're not able to attend, if you wanted to find out more information about it, I would recommend that you register. It's off of our website, jmtconsulting.com, and then under events. What it will do is, even if you can't attend, register so that you can get the recording of that sent to you. And then, of course, all of these presentations are on YouTube as well. But if you register, you'll get an email with that recording. And then the last item here is, in time of funding uncertainty, agility is everything. So, we talked a little bit, Chris, you and I talked a little bit of how Sage is able to save some money for the organizations. Well, it's also important when we talk about managing in uncertain times, is that we're going to be, you're probably going to be looking at your funding pipeline. So where are we in revenue, right? I wouldn't say constantly, but very often, whether it's a weekly, for some organizations it could be weekly or monthly basis, right? And that is the what. But the how you manage that is where the technology comes into play. The technology just makes the how so much easier. And in that presentation, we're going to be looking at an FP&A solution. It's called Vena. And it's reporting, it's budgeting, forecasting. And so when you're dealing with funding uncertainty, you want to be able to do forecasting, and you want to be able to do scenario planning quickly. You can't wait. If you're meeting month, you can't do a 2-month what if scenario planning. It needs to be able to turn around like fairly quickly and be able to capture where you are in actuals and then what are you going to do for the rest of the year, and also multi-year planning as well. Because if you're in a situation where there's you know, funding uncertainty, you want to make sure you're just making sure you're managing your scenarios, doing multi-year planning. And these are the tools that can help you do that. So anyway, this really, I'm going to click on this next slide, concludes our presentation. So first of all, I wanted to thank Chris Neely. Thank you so much for your insight, your input. This has been very, very valuable. I do hope that everyone who's joining us, I want to thank you, and I hope that you all are able to gain something from our presentation. And yeah, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to either of us. I'm available. I have my contact there, and I can certainly connect you with Chris if you have any questions for her as well. So I wanted to thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.